Hello everybody! Today is Monday and we are on part 2 of factoring trinomials. Part 1 is looking as if you do not have this coefficient in the front that understood a, okay, and you would just have x squared plus bx plus c. Part 2 is, okay, what do I do if I have a coefficient in front of my first term? And that's what we're going to be analyzing today. So you'll see these sections in your textbook divided into two instead of, I call it part 1, part 2 because it's easier to type up assignments. But in your book, you'll see it factoring trinomials in the form of x squared plus bx plus c and in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. So let's look at our agenda for the day. You are to watch the March 30th agenda video. You have a set of video notes, and then you have a My Math Lab assignment. As always, email me if you have any questions. All right, let's do a little bit of review of what factoring is. For this section, I like throwing this review in here at the beginning because it shows the differences in the different methods we are looking at. Differences in the methods that we are looking at. And so far, we've looked at greatest common factors. We've looked at differences of squares. We've looked at factoring trinomials part 1 in that certain form. And then today we're going to look at factoring trinomials part 2. All of these different methods you will use in certain scenarios based off the problem that is given to you. And later this week, we're going to make a map, a roadmap that's going to be kind of like our cheat sheet and how to deal with, okay, it just gives me a problem, but it doesn't tell me what type of factoring method to use. So based off the evidence provided, I get to pick a method. So let's look at those methods real quick before we dive into our new method. What is factoring? Okay, it's kind of like that backward simplifying. You're going to break up a number in its terms into its factors so it can be multiplied to get your original number. Whenever we're given a problem, we want to be able to move forward. We want to be able to go backward. And using those backward methods, that's what factoring is. So greatest common factor, you look at your problem and say, hey, what quantity can I divide out of all of my terms? So for this example of 10x plus 100, I can divide out to 10, giving me 10 times x plus 10. Difference of squared, if I have two terms with a subtraction sign in the middle, and I can also take the square root of both of those terms. Oh, low battery. Okay, we can do this, we can push through. If I can take the square root of both of those terms, I can factor it out to equal x plus 5 and x minus 5. Then we looked on Friday, we looked at factoring trinomials if we had the form of x squared plus bx plus c. And it's using that method of adding to get your middle and multiplying to get your end or your last product. And today we're going to be using a form of that. So what do we do if we have a trinomial that has a coefficient on the first term? And here's our steps. So we're going to go through each step and complete the problem of factoring 2x squared plus bx plus 3. Our first step is to slide or slip our a value, which would be our 2, to the end of the trinomial and multiplied by c. This is the only different step that's majorly different, and then we do the same steps as before. So when I slip my a over to my last term, my c, I get x squared plus 5x plus 6. Why do we do this step? Well, it helps us come up with our final factor product because when I do use FOIL, I will multiply those terms. Now that I have this new problem, I'm going to factor this problem just the same as I would before. So I'll have x times x. Okay, I have both addition signs, so I am going to, have pluses. Now I have to look and see what adds up to equal 5, but what numbers also multiply to equal 6. So let's look at our factors of 6. 1 and 6, 2 and 3. If I add 1 and 6, will that equal 5? No, but if I add 2 and 3, that will. So I'm going to use the multiples of 2 and 3. and that will be my factor problem. But I am not done, okay? So this step 3 is that additional number, that other additional step. So now that I have x plus 2 times x plus 3, I'm going to divide both of my factors by the value that you slipped over in step 1. So dividing that by 2. I'm going to divide by 2. Divide by 2. I get x plus 1, and I get x plus 3 halves. Well, I do not want to leave that number as 3 halves. So I'm going to remove that 2 and place it in front of my x. So I get x plus 1 times 2x plus 3. That's my final answer. And going through those extra steps ensures that we can get that coefficient in the front. So let me double check to make sure I did that right. Let's distribute. So x times 2x gives me 2x squared. X times 3 gives me 3x. 1 times 2x gives me 2x. And 1 times 3 gives me 3, which reduces down to 2x squared plus 5x plus 3. There's my same answer as our same problem as I had from the beginning. All right, so let me erase this real quick. I know it seems a little bit complicated, which honestly, all of these processes, if you've never seen them before, they're complicated, but you know how it becomes uncomplicated? Practice, practice, practice. So really here, my steps are to slip my A and multiply my C, factor my trinomial, divide my factors by A, and then reduce my fractions and simplify. Okay, so let's look at another example. I have 5m squared minus 17m plus 6, and I want to factor. My first job is to slide. So that 5 is going to come down here and multiply by 6. So I'm going to have m squared minus 17m plus 30. All right, so I have to think, what are my multiples of 30? And so I can get to negative 17. So I have 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, 5 and 6. So looking at that list, what can I add together to get negative 17? Well, 5 and 15 and 2 give me 17, but I need to make that negative. So if I have a negative 2 times a negative 15, is that going to give me a positive 30? Yes. And I have a negative 2 plus a negative 15. Does that give me negative 17? Yes. So I'm going to have negative 2 and negative 15. My next step is to divide both of those terms by 5, because that's the number that I slipped. So divide by 5, divide by 5. 2/5 does not simplify down all the way. So I'm going to slip that 5 in front of my variable. So I will have 5m minus 2 times m minus 15 divided by 3 gives me 3. And there's my final answer. All right. Let's double check to make sure we did that right. So 5m times m gives me 5m squared. Negative 2 times m gives me negative 2m. 5m times negative 3 gives me negative 15m. And negative 2 times negative 3 gives me positive 6. Whew. So then I get 5m squared minus 17m plus 6. Check. That's how you guarantee you get all of those problems right, is by redistributing it. Okay? So remember, slip, factor, divide, and simplify. All right, let's look at 6y squared minus 5y minus 4. My first step is to slide my first coefficient. So 6 down to negative 4 gives me negative 24. So I have, oh, I'm going to scooch that over. Oh, what am I doing? Y squared minus 5y minus 24. Now it's time to factor. So I'm going to have y times y. All right. Whew. Factors of 24. Multiples of 24. 1 and 24. 2 and 12. 3 and 8. 4 and 6. Okay. Looking at those, how do I get to 5? You also have to remember that I'm trying to get to negative 24. So one of those values has to be negative. So 1 minus 24, that doesn't get me anywhere. 24 minus 1, no. 2 minus 12 does not equal negative 5. 12 minus 2 does not equal negative 5. 8 minus 3 gives me a positive 5. However, 3 minus 8 gives me negative 5. So I'm going to use plus 3 minus 8. Now, before I distribute, or before I say, hey, that's my final answer, remember I have to come back and divide that 6. So divide by 6, divide by 6. Okay. Before you drag over your 6 out, because I'm looking at those fractions, and neither of those divide out to a clean number. However, I'm going to reduce those values because it makes my job easier in the end. So, what does 3/6 reduce down to? 1/2. What does negative 8 divided by 6 reduce down to? 4/3. Now I slide those denominators over. So I get 2y plus 1 and 3y minus 4. Woo, that's a hefty one. Okay, multiply. See if you got it right. I hope I did. Okay, but let's double check. So 2y times 3y gives me 6y squared. 2y times negative 4 gives me negative 8y. 1 times 3y gives me positive 3y. And 1 times negative 4 gives me negative 4. Reduce to give me 6y squared minus 5y minus 4. Woo! Check. There you have it, folks. So my final answer is my factored quantities. Okay, I have 3 more problems to go through. Honestly, these are just more examples of how to factor trinomials. So if you get it and you got it and you're good and you're ready to move on and start working, you're more than welcome to. At this point, if you want to watch another problem, have me go through it, go ahead. I'm just going to keep chugging along and doing more problems. So there's 3 more. All right, time to slip that 12 over to factor. So 12 times 5 gives me 60. C squared, oh, yikes, plus 11c minus 60. Now I factor. So let me think about my quantities of 60. This is a big one. 1, 60, 2, 30, 3, and 20. 4 and what's 60 divided by 4? Let me get from my calculator. I can't do that one off the top of my head. I can do a lot of things, but that's not one. 15. Uh-oh, I think that's a good one. 5 and 12. Because I'm looking at this and I see that 60 is negative. So one of these values is going to have to be negative. And my middle value is 11. And if I take 15 minus 4, that gives me 11. Ding, ding, ding. So I'm going to have C plus 15 and C minus 4. All right. My last step is to divide by 12. Divide by 12, divide by 12. Neither of those reduces out nice and pretty, so I need to reduce those fractions before I move on. So C plus, let's see, both of those are divisible by 3. So 15 divided by 3 gives me 5. 12 divided by 3 gives me 4. C minus, both of those are divisible by 4, so 1/3. Now I slip those values back over. So I get 4C plus 5, 3C minus 1 to be my end problem, or my end factor. Okay, let me double check. So 4C times CC gives me 12C squared. 4C times -1, gives me -4C. 5 times 3 gives me 15C, and 5 times 1 gives me -5, which reduces down to 12C squared plus 11C minus 5. All right, let's look at another one. Factor the following trinomials of 9m squared plus 3m minus 2. Time to slip 9 down. So it gives me m squared plus 3m minus 18, because I'm going to multiply that 9 by 2. Now it's time to factor that trinomial, which my factors of 18 are 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. Which of those values can I use to get to positive 3? Well, and I have to remember my product is -18. So one of those values is going to have to be negative. Well, 6 minus 3 gives me positive 3. So I'm going to use plus 6 minus 3. I'm going to divide both of those quantities by 9. And none of those come out nice and pretty, so I'm going to reduce those fractions to give me m plus 2 over 3 times m minus 1/3. I'm going to drag those 3 O's over to give me 3m plus 2 times 3m. Oh no, don't select all. Minus 1 to give me my final answer. Let's double check to make sure we factored that correctly. So 3m times 3m gives me 9m squared. 6m, 3m minus 2. Reduce that down. I get 9m squared plus 3m minus 2. Check. I know I went through that one quickly. However, the more you do these, there becomes a method to it where you can quickly go through them. Okay. Last one, 4a squared minus 4a plus 1. Okay, I have this trinomial. I know I'm going to have to use the slip and slide method because I have that coefficient in front of my first term. So I'm going to slip that 4 over to give me a squared minus 4a plus 4. I need to use my factors of 4 to get to -4. So 1 and 4, 2 and 2. I'm going to have my a's in the front. So which of those problems can I use to get to a negative middle term? Well, I can use -2 and -2. So -2, -2. I'm going to divide by 4. Divide both of those terms, not your variable, just your term. Those reduce down to a minus 1/2 and a minus 1/2. My 2 slides over to give me 2a minus 1, 2a minus 1, which actually this problem can be simplified even further just to give me 2a minus 1 squared. So you'll see these, if it's the same value being multiplied by each other, you can combine it to a square. All right, this final answer reduced, let's double check to make sure we're right. Or let's multiply it. So 2 times 2a gives me 4a squared minus 2a minus 2a plus 1, which gives me 4a squared minus 4a plus 1. Check. All right, and that's factoring trinomials. So we're done. Woo! Just in time, low battery. We are done just in time. We're finished factoring trinomials. We have one more section on factoring, which is a process called grouping. So what if I have 4 terms instead of just 3 or 2? You have watched your agenda video, you have watched your notes video. Your last task is to complete your My Math Lab. And as always, email me if you have any questions, guys. Miss you.